United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Seems like we lost the video feed. What happened? We lost the video feed. We lost the video.
Okay, while we do repairs on the video stream, I want to thank everyone for coming this afternoon. This is an informational session to try to inform and educate everyone present about single stream and dual stream and what's going on in the solid waste world that we're all facing right now. I want to introduce one of our board members, David Gordon, who is going to do the presentation. David, ready?
Good evening, everyone. Let's see if this is live here. My name is Dave Gordon. I'm the vice chair of the UCRRA. And what we're doing tonight, before we have the informational meeting, we'll have a give and take with everybody, is we just want to go through a short presentation where we're going to lay out some of the basic facts of, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, who the UCRRA is, what we do, what our facilities are, what specific issue we're dealing with today in terms of single stream recycling, what that means, what it is, what the alternatives are. Just very basic. This shouldn't last for longer than 15 minutes, and then we'll take your questions and we'll have a broader discussion. If you have any questions during the presentation, this is an informal meeting, so feel free to raise them.
I just want to make one comment. We have the chambers for 2 hours, so we'll take as many questions as possible, but we have to vacate by 7 o'clock. So.
And we're going to talk more about the process at the end. But next week, we're going to have another meeting where we kind of propose a course of action. And then next month, at that meeting next week, we're going to set a date for a public hearing next month. So this is not going to be your last chance to speak to us. This is not going to be our last opportunity to hear from you. After next week, when we propose a course of action, we're going to have a public hearing. And so we're going to have a much more extensive opportunity to hear from the public, both in person and also in writing. As many of you may have heard, the basic issue for tonight, and we will get into the details, is the question of single stream recycling, and the alternative to single stream recycling in general is dual stream recycling, so we'll just start off explaining what those mean. As many of you know, probably everybody here who does it, when you recycle a number of materials, a number of different categories of materials. And so it's important to know what we talk about when we talk about two streams or one stream, because of course there are probably 6 or 7 different categories. Essentially, in dual stream, you're separating out categories of materials into bigger categories. And one of them is mixed recyclables, which is all your plastics, your metals, and your glass. So that becomes one stream. And the second stream is your paper, newspapers, cardboard. Those are 2 different streams that get separated. That's called dual stream. In single stream, all of those categories are in one bin. So all the metal, all the glass, all the plastic, all the newspaper, what we call the news, magazines, etc., and also cardboard is all in one stream. In dual stream, the paper is essentially separate. This is, again, the definition of single stream. This is actually a photograph of the single stream mound on the floor of our material recovery facility that I took the day that we had the open house up there, the day we had the legislative meeting, which was, I believe, May 4th. So we're going to come back to this and what's in the single stream and why it poses certain problems. The first thing we need to do is to talk about our facility and who we are. We're the agency that essentially handles much of the county's waste. As a matter of law, we handle the portion of the county's waste that's essentially municipal solid waste. You're basically garbage. By law, everybody in the county who generates or handles municipal solid waste has to bring it to us. And we are the sole agency. That's called flow control. The flow control exists for regular municipal solid waste. It does not exist, and we'll discuss this, it does not exist for recycling. which means that there's an open market in recycling, but there is not for municipal solid waste. Our recycling facility at the RRA is a dual stream facility. That means we are built to handle the recycling that comes into us in those two different streams, the mixed glass, paper, metal, and the paper. I'm sorry, the mixed glass, plastic and metal in one stream and paper in the other stream. We are built to essentially separate those out. If they're mixed together in single stream, our facility does not do that. In fact, when we do handle single stream, as we currently do for some of the people in the county that want to use our facility, all we provide is a floor. Basically, you come in, you dump single stream on the floor. That mound that we saw in the last the slide gets dumped on our floor. It gets picked up in the same way. We don't do anything with it. We're just literally transferring it from the haulers that bring it to us, including the city, to wherever it's going. So we don't add any value to it. We're just moving the floor. And that's what I described on this slide. A couple of things to think about is we operate in many ways as a business. And what we do with recycling is a commodity. And what that means is on a month-to-month and even a week-to-week basis, as we get recycling in, whether it's single stream or dual stream, we're looking for markets for it. We're looking to sell it. We're looking to get the most that we can for it for the people of the county. That means on a week-to-week, on a day-to-day basis, Tim Rose, who's our executive director, and his staff are constantly checking out the market. So this is a constantly changing the market, and a lot of what we're going to talk about today is the market for, particularly for single stream and also for dual stream. One of the most critical facts that we're dealing with right now, and a lot of what this presentation is about, is the series of facts that we have seen on the RRA board over the last 2 years, but really over the last year, is the declining market for single stream. We're going to talk about first what the numbers are, and second what the fundamentals are behind it. What we're seeing is a very significant decline in the availability in the market, availability to get rid of in the market to buy our single stream recycling. On this graph, essentially that horizontal line at the bottom of the brown bars and at the top of the red bars is 0. At that line, we're neither getting anything nor paying anything to get rid of it. Those brown bars to the left represent the past, essentially before 2018. The point right in the mid, toward the right there, that's January 2018. So everything to the left is 2016, 2017 on a month-to-month basis. And what you can see is that the price that we're getting for single stream, starting 2016 through 2017, fluctuated between $5 a ton, was generally right around $10 a ton, which is that horizontal line right over here. And at one point in May of 17, actually got up close to $20 a ton. But in general, it stayed 10, 12, 13, right up to September of 2017. And then in September 2017, which is that last sort of tall brown line, things started to go south. And you can see that for the rest of 2017, we essentially got to 0. And again, at 0, we're neither spending money nor we're getting money for it. Before that, we're getting money, we're selling our single stream. At that point, at the end of last year, we're neither getting money nor spending money to get rid of it, other than it does cost us money to handle it within the RRA. It costs us basically $15 a ton just to have people working on it, to have it, etc. So that's important to keep in mind. So even at the high points here, we're really not making any money on it. We're getting revenue to cover our costs. Over here, we're at 0. And then for this year, and by the way, at this point, when we were at 0, we set the price to charge the haulers in the county that do bring single stream to us, and not everybody does, because this is a free market. They can bring it wherever whatever other outlets they have, they can bring it to, and most of them do. But the city and other haulers that bring it to us, we set the price for that, and for the first time, we were charging people because we needed money to essentially get rid of it. We knew the market was getting very, very soft. In fact, it was getting much, much worse. We knew why it was happening, which we'll discuss in a minute. And we set the price going into this year at $20 a ton. Just to give you a reference, when haulers around the county bring us municipal solid waste, that's $103 a ton. So it still is very, very good to recycle. It saves a lot of money, but we need essentially $20. We thought we need $20 a ton simply to clear the market price to get rid of single stream. And that was the first time we ever had to charge for recycling. And that's what it is today. It's still $20 a ton. Part of what we will be considering is what to do about that price and over what time frame. As you can see, as we got into 2018, almost immediately as that price was set, it was obsolete. Because these are the average prices over each of the first 4 months of 2018. By January, we were at what appears to be, and we have the exact numbers, but just looking at the graphs, about $23 a ton we're paying to get rid of it. That's in addition to the $15 it costs us to handle it. By February, we were at what appears to be, and again, we'll pick up the numbers, about $28 a ton. March, we're paying $40 a ton, whoops. And April last month, we're paying $50. And all those numbers are now obsolete. We're now going to 70?
We're at 56 right now.
Right now we're at 56, but do we have notification that we're going to be going up to 70 to pay?
They did notify us that we were going to be somewhere in the mid-70s, but then they restructured their pricing. So now what they have is they have a two categories when it comes into the single stream plant, a clean load, what they call, with less contaminants, and a more dirty load. The dirty loads are $107 a ton that they're charging. So if there's too many contaminants in it, it's going to be $107 a ton. It's what they consider somewhat of a clean load. They're limiting it to 56.
So what we're dealing with is obviously a market which is in very rapid negative fluctuation. We're paying a substantial amount of money to get rid of this. It's changing very, very rapidly, and we're getting new information every day. And as we'll see, this is one of the important things for us to remember, and you're going to know a lot more about this as we get to the end of this presentation. This is not something that's Ulster County specific. It's not something that's Hudson Valley specific. It's not something that's New York State specific. It is worldwide. And the reason it's worldwide is because it's essentially, ultimately, one outlet for all of this material, and they don't want this material anymore. And what we're seeing essentially is the rippling through the market, through all the middlemen, all the outlets for it. As one leads to another, and ultimately it gets packed onto container ships to China. When the Chinese are saying no, which they started saying in definitive terms right here, right at January of 2018, what we're seeing is the market essentially collapsing around the world. And we'll get into that a little bit more. This graph shows over the last year the markets for each of the individual commodities that leave our recycling operation. The bottom one, which is in red, is single stream. And as you can see, that's hovering right around zero, relatively. Toward the left of the graph, which is over the last year, it's just above zero, approximately at $10 a ton on the positive side. As you get more toward the current day, which is to the right of the graph, it's going below zero, which is the horizontal line, toward, as we heard, -20, -30, -40, -50. All of these other lines represent particular streams that we're getting positive money for because they're coming out of our dual stream operation. We separate them at the RRA and we get money for them. And what we'll do is, rather than try to read this graph, which is a little bit difficult, the next few slides are going to break it down for us, at least over the last month. We're going to see the prices that we're getting in April of 2018. The first one is for what we call color, HDPE. You can see that this is, you can identify these as detergent bottles and things like that. We're getting $400 a ton once they are separated. We bale them, as you're seeing here. This is at the end of our recycling operation where they go through the machine, they get separated, they get baled. These bales sell for $400 a ton in April of 2018. What we call natural, which is the same material, but it's essentially opaque, gray, the type of thing that's a milk carton. We're getting, in April, $800 a ton for it. The PETE, which is soda bottles, we're getting almost $300 a ton for it in April. Used beverage containers, getting almost $1,000 a ton for that again, this is all a finished product, totally separated, coming out of a dual stream process that goes through our MRF. And after it's been baled, we're getting $980 a ton for that in April. And again, this is the right side of that graph that we just saw before with all those colored lines going across the page. For cardboard, we're getting $90 a ton for that. Tin, $250 a ton. Single stream, as of April, we're paying an average $51 a ton to get rid of it. That's that red line going below the zero. Again, the thing to remember is that this is all the same material. Single stream consists, at its best, of all those things that we just went through and a few other things as well. The thing to remember is once it goes through a single stream process, the value is the numbers that we're seeing. You can no longer get $300, $400, $500, $600 a ton for it. You're paying $50 a ton to get rid of it in April. Next month, it's going to cost more. And that's, as we're going to see, that's the nature of the process. It changes the value because it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to deal with to change the single stream back to where it should be, and also a lot of the single stream gets lost as useful recycling. And we'll go through the reasons.
Steve, could I ask you
Sure, and
a
Steve,
quick question on the number? But those numbers, what you get paid, doesn't take into consideration the cost of you all to process it and separate it, correct? And so, we don't know how much the single stream companies are actually selling the separated material for once they separate it. They could be getting 200 or 300 a ton for separated, HDPE after the single stream plant processes it. We don't know those numbers.
I would like both Ken and also Charlie Whitaker, our operations manager, to answer that more specifically. But in general, I would, on the board, we're presuming, and this is a general presumption that we're making, that the market is functioning relatively honestly. In other words, we're not presuming that we're getting ripped off by the people that we bring into. We presume that there's competition, that they turn around and sell it to other suppliers that are putting it on trucks to the Chinese, and the market is functioning relatively well. And I'd love to have Tim comment on that more.
Yeah.
So,
you would assume that would be the case, but it's not. What's happening? What's happening is we're talking about the national sword that's happening right now. It's a national sword initiative started in January 1 of this year by the Chinese government, and they basically have had enough of all the contamination that's coming into their country, and the bulk of that is single stream. They just started a newest initiative called the Blue Sky Initiative. So now they're sending inspectors over to the U.S. and they're going into plants and they're doing what's called bale breaks. And with those bale breaks, what they're doing is they're picking out a couple of different bales, let's say in the MRF, the Material Recovery Facility. They'll pull them out, they'll bring them down to the floor, they'll break the bale open, and if there's anything more than 0.5% contamination, they'll reject everything. They're not taking it. So what's spurring all this is the contamination rates in single stream itself, just inherently, are vastly greater than dual stream plants. They do come into the dual stream plants, but they're not finding any issues in the dual stream plants. I was at the past couple of days, I was at a conference in Lake George on this particular topic, solid waste and recycling as well. But I spent a couple of hours this morning talking about this very issue with my peers and with national experts. And again, this is happening throughout globally, and I want to stress that. Australia's having a worse time than we are. There's bales going out in parking lots and just sitting there, and they're not being moved. So what's happening is the contamination issues that are inherent with single stream. And what I mean by that is when you throw everything in one container, and that gets put into a collection truck, it gets put into a long haul truck, goes through processing, the glass breaks, gets ground into the fiber, the paper and the cardboard, and that product becomes useless. That goes into a paper mill and destroy the equipment. So in the dual stream, you don't have those issues. So what's happening here, what's driving this, again, I can't stress this enough, is the fact that the Chinese government has decided that they're not going to deal with these contamination issues anymore. Over the past 10 years, there's been an environmental awakening in China, and now they're really seeing what's happening environmentally in their own country, and they want to bring those standards up. That's really what's happening. So that's driving a lot of that. So when you say you think you get a lot of it, you got to understand At a single stream plant, when everything's mixed together, there's a lot of additional labor costs involved. There's a lot of additional equipment that's involved, optical eye sorters and things that are trying to get the least contaminated product they could possibly get, because they don't want to be rejected and not have it sent to China either.
That answer, your question really went more toward whether or not the recyclers were sort of perhaps not being fully honest and not giving us the proper prices. Is that answer your
No,
question?
I just, when we talk numbers, it's just, I was wondering if your, like, $400 a ton included the cost to the agency to get that $400 a ton. I don't think it did.
No,
That's what, that was really my major question.
That's just the revenue. We have, on the cost side, we have our cost of operations.
Okay.
And I know for single stream, generally costs us $15 a ton. The other thing is, we have the MRF, which is, the amortization of the MRF, and that was an expensive facility, and we're not, as people who follow us know, we're not completely covering those costs of the MRF. But we do have the MRF, and we do use the dual stream, and also the fees that we get in on MSW, municipal solid waste, to cover that.
But also too, if I can just say this, you have to be able to move the product as well. What's happening in a lot of states, Massachusetts being one of them, the further east you go, the worse it's getting. There's trucking costs involved, we're getting product to the ports and so forth, to the markets. So the further east you go, the worse it gets. I was just in a seminar just this morning about this, and they were talking about in Massachusetts, they just shut down 2 single stream plants. They just shut them down because they couldn't move the product. It was too contaminated. They couldn't even sell it. No matter what price they were trying to get, the Chinese government was not accepting it. So you have to understand how this is why this is being driven the way it is. And there are some larger facilities that are now starting to think about going back to dual stream. Excuse me, my throat is bothering me. Which is a real possibility. It may come to a point where larger haulers and so forth may actually start switching back to a dual stream type structure if you can't get rid of the contaminated material. And I've heard too, while it looks like the recycling rates may be higher, maybe in single stream collection areas, in reality what happens when you go to a single stream plant, and I've seen these numbers, and we're talking about them this morning, anywhere from 15 to 30% of that recycling ends up being landfilled because of the contamination that's involved with it. So.
And also 60 to 70% of single stream is fiber, and that's what's not moving.
That's right, exactly. I don't know if you heard that or not, but 60 to 70% is fiber in the single stream.
Question?
Yeah, it's sort of a follow-up on the mayor's question, is that I understand, that the paper gets contaminated. I certainly understand that, but the plastic doesn't get contaminated. The cans does not get contaminated when you're doing a single stream. So
Right.
I think it has to do with something like the mayor brought up, is the idea that even in a single stream, when it gets separated out, you're still going to get the money for the plastic and the cans and so on and so forth.
You have to understand, though, a single stream MRF is extremely expensive to operate. So, you can't live in a vacuum. You got to look at this thing holistically. So when the MRF operator, and a lot of these are private sector, not all of them. There's some municipalities as well. When they're looking at their MRF, they're looking at labor costs, they're looking at electrical costs. There's one MRF I heard that they're trying to spend about $700,000 just in extra optical equipment that they can possibly sort this. Before this happened, they would run 3 shifts a day at a lot of these facilities. Now they're down to 1 shift. They laid off 30, 40 people. The reason is because A, they can't move the product. B, they're slowing the line way down. Okay, so they're not accepting as much product coming in. They're blocking the doors. And they're slowing the line down to let the people try to pick out as much as they can. And,
Could you explain MRF?
Material recovery facility.
Well, what does it look like?
It depends if it's single stream or dual stream.
Okay.
There are 2 different types of plants. Our dual stream, the commingle will go up on a conveyor belt where garbage may be separated out in the initial phase. And then
This is done by humans.
Some. The next phase is a magnetic belt that takes out anything with ferrous in it, any of your soup cans. The next one is a glass breaker that breaks the glass and it falls down through. The next phase are hand sorting. So they're sorting by the different types of plastics. And the second to last phase is an eddy current belt, which takes out the aluminum. Because obviously aluminum is not magnetic, so it's not going to get It's not gonna, it doesn't contain iron, obviously, so it's not gonna be taken out by the first belt. And the last phase is any garbage that goes through, that's extracted. So that's how our MRF works. And in single stream MRFs, they have brushes that shoot the cardboard off. They have, which actually brings up a point. I don't want to get off the topic too much, but plastic bags are a big issue. They're not recyclable. And when those go into, especially a single stream plant with those brushes, they get wrapped up in the brushes. And a lot of single stream plants, and I just heard it today, have to shut down 6-7 times a day just to try to get all the plastic bags out. Shredded paper is another thing. You know, if you try to put shredded paper in a single stream plant, they have air jets that are with optical sorters. They're trying to sort the material. It hits it, it's like confetti. So you can't put shredded paper in a single stream facility. Dual stream you can. Dual stream it'll go strictly in with the paper. I'll make that happen.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to put some real numbers when you say that, you know, the processing costs more for single stream, at a single stream MRF, materials recovery facility, versus the processing at UCRRA. I don't mean right this minute, but also I think what Mayor Noble was asking was, you listed what we're getting, and it would be valuable to know what the nearest, or you know, in the region, what the single stream MRFs that are investing in the equipment and the labor, you know, just to really do a real cost comparison. And I'm not expecting you to do it right this minute, but I think that would be valuable information. Let me just say one more thing, because I have to go to this other meeting. I don't think we're going to solve this tonight or even with another public hearing, and I want to make a recommendation that we consider reconvening an existing body, which is called the Recycling Oversight Committee, that the legislature created to see which new materials we could add as mandatory recyclables. And we've met on several occasions over the last decade or so, and added in, for example, waste mail and magazines, I think was added in. We're now at a point where the markets are difficult. You know, there's an international component, and I think because the Recycling Oversight Committee was so stakeholder inclusive, it included haulers, it included environmental groups, it included the city of Kingston, included the agency, included some of the legislature, and you know, and a few others, that we should really seriously consider reconvening that and doing a consensus building process for the long term. I know that the agency, in terms of dollars, has to consider what it's going to do in the short term, and so does the city. But what I don't want to see happen, we all live in the same county. I want to find a mechanism for us to be able to work together. So I'd like to just put that on the table, and I apologize for taking presentation time, but I do have to get to this other meeting.
If I can just respond just real quick to that. I'm not sure what we're going to get out of that if we start comparing numbers to single stream, because we don't have a single stream facility. So what we're trying to show you here is what we're grappling with at our agency, okay? So whatever the single stream facility is doing with their labor costs and so forth, it's going to be hard to get because it's private sector. I don't know if they're going to release a lot of information. But I'm not sure what we're going to get out of that. The bottom line is we're still being charged $56 a ton. That's the reality. So we can go through that exercise, but I don't know what it's going to show us. I honestly don't, because we don't operate, unless you want to build a single stream plant, which right now, I can tell you, would be the worst idea in the world, because there's single stream plants that are shutting down, so.
Tim, I completely agree, but I think that knowing this legislature, who ultimately is fiscally responsible, even though the agency has done a great job of balancing its budget, I think the legislators are going to want to know numbers. So, you know, I don't mean extensive research, but if that information is available, we want to be comparing apples and apples.
I just want to make one point regarding both Mayor Noble's question and also Legislator Donaldson's. The numbers here have two different meanings for us. One is, as our agency, as anybody in the county government, particularly the legislature, knows, we are under almost a mandate to basically break even and to not run a deficit. We integrate the county, basically the county's garbage, all the MSW and certain recycling facilities. And there was for a number of years, we were running a deficit and the legislature and the county had to essentially make up the difference. We're under essentially a directive, which we take extremely seriously, to break even. So the numbers to us are essentially business numbers. But I also want to make one other point about the numbers and answer both Mr. Noble and also Mr. Donaldson's questions. I'm looking at the numbers as well as what I really hope is an honest indication of the market. In other words, there's a reason why these numbers are what they are, and I'm not assuming that it's because somebody else is jimmying the market and making a lot of money on it. What that means in particular with Mr. Donaldson's question is, you know, anecdotally, you can say, well, if we take the single stream and if you just sort of find a way to, you know, separate out those valuable ones, and it's really the same materials we were seeing that was getting $500, $600, $700, $800 a ton. Well, that's valuable stuff, right? There should be a way to get there, and why are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater? What I would presume, though, and I'll open this up to anybody who knows more than I do, is that when we see a number of minus $51 a ton for single stream totally, that integrates all those issues. In other words, you got to take the bad with the good. And although there's valuable stuff in there, but that might be worth $800 a ton. If it costs $850 to get at it, because you've got to clean it all out, you've got to get rid of the lousy cardboard, you've got to actually throw out a lot of the stuff at whatever it costs. Ultimately, I look at that number as integrating all those issues. And so ultimately, the fact that I look at is that when you have single stream, whatever else good things you think are in it, when you integrate all the problems with it, all the other factors in it, you're looking at a minus 51, and that's probably an honest indication of what you have. If there's information contrary to that, it's very, very valuable that we can see it, and that might also feed into Amanda's question, figuring out where do we go from here. But at least at this point, in addition to our bottom line, I'm just assuming that the market is, at least in terms of, well, the Chinese are obviously directly influencing the market, but that's something we just kind of have to take. That's their decision, at least at this point, until they're convinced otherwise. So we are looking at these numbers both in terms of our own fiscal bottom line, but also I would suggest that that's basically the nature of the beast. Tim, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a copy of the 2011 report that we got from DeBurka and Bartolucci, and one of the options was to convert to single stream. And they did a lot of calling around and everything, and they said operating costs increased by approximately 10% with the single stream.
Operating cost of the MRF?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's 10%. And that study is, what, 8, 9 years old?
It's approximately 7. The information probably
7
comes
years
from more
old?
8, 9 years old, though.
Okay. And remember, they're shutting these plants down. It was discussed just this morning. These single-stream plants are shutting them down in Massachusetts. They're having a real hard time. They're issuing waivers. They're actually depositing single-stream recycling in the landfills because it's not moving. It's stopped. So this is truly a national issue. When I say it's a national issue, these speakers that were there, and this is a big conference. There's speakers there that are coming from all over the United States speaking on this topic. It was a greatly debated topic this morning and over the past several days. I heard there's tipping fees at some plants in the Northeast now are up to $115 a ton. $115 a ton they're paying to get rid of this. We only pay $54 a ton to get rid of garbage. And that's shipping it all the way out to Syracuse. So that's a reality. It's a commodity. You're dealing with the markets, and you're dealing with the markets, and you have a you have a person in the room with a big stick like China who said enough is enough, we're done. And you got to look at these other outlets. You're dealing with national corporations too. You're dealing with $19 billion corporations like Waste Management, and they have people on this because they have a huge investment in this nationally and globally, for that matter. They're looking at it. They're trying to look at markets in India. They're trying to look at markets in Vietnam. And those markets are trying to open up, but they cannot take everything that China can. Some of the material is going to Vietnam, believe it or not. It's the single stream. The Vietnamese are trying to clean it up as best they can, and they're trying to sell it to the Chinese markets. So it's a reality of the situation. It comes down to the contamination
and it comes down to that alone. So,
Okay, the chairman reminds me that we really want to hear from the public, and so we'll try to move this along as quickly as we can. I don't mean to cut off any questions. I also actually just want to make one other final point in terms of the fiscal nature. Not only are we under, basically a mandate to break even, there's one other point I want to make in terms of us, if we were to choose to, for instance, lose money, continue losing money on single stream. Right now, we're charging 20, it's costing us, let's say, to throw a loose number out there, $60 a ton to get rid of it, counting, it's probably more than that, 65 now, let's say 70. That means we're essentially losing $50 a ton, every ton of single stream we're getting. And if we do, let's say, 500 tons a month, which is average, that's $25,000 a month that we're losing. Setting aside the issue fiscally for us and whether we can handle that or not, the thing for people to consider is that's $25,000 a month that we're spending at the RRA to essentially subsidize the disposal of single stream from the people who bring a single stream. That would be the city of Kingston, and there's one other town, the town of Ulster, which has a very, very small amount of it, and I believe is actually going to be moving from that because of the situation, as well as the private haulers. And the breakdown is approximately, at this point, 40% we're getting from the municipalities and 60% from the private haulers. And so what that means is on a month-to-month basis, and the money we're spending is public money. It's money that we get from the people of Ulster County through our tipping fees and our other fees. And so we're taking money from, broadly, the people of Ulster County and putting it into an operation which would be subsidizing particular users, and particular the private haulers that bring their recycling to us, and also the two municipalities, primarily the city of Kingston. And so that's just something for us to keep in mind as to what extent and how long we can continue with that type of a subsidy, which is coming from the county as a whole and going toward certain municipalities and private individuals. Again, it's just something that we are very conscious of on the board as to what extent that is an appropriate thing to do. We're doing it now because we're only charging $20 a ton, and you saw the numbers. So this is something which is very much on our minds as we move forward as to how we handle a situation like that, particularly with very unstable prices.
And if I can just say, one thing that was said this morning is that I understand what the mayor is dealing with here, is that it was well discussed how much this is busting municipal budgets all over the place, everywhere. And it's like I said, it's even greater in some of the northeastern states than we're experiencing here. We actually have, it's not bad at $56 a ton. I'm hearing 115, and I'm hearing in some areas they can't even move it. It's shut down. So City of Kingston's not alone. We're not alone. This is a global thing. I can't stress that enough, but it is busting. I heard that word this morning. Municipal budgets all over. So.
One of our board members, Charlie Landy, also wanted to make a comment, and I promise we'll move straight through the rest.
I'll be quick. And this is to Steve, Mayor Steve, and Dave Donaldson, and Manager Green. When the RRA first came into being, its losses were subsidized by the county.
Please hold your microphone as if it were an ice cream cone.
I'm sorry, is that better?
Thank you.
I'm sorry. When the RRA first came into being, its losses were subsidized by the county through a net service fee. Whatever we lost, the county made up. If the county wants to go back to that, we can work with that. Thank you, Dave.
All right, let's hop back on here. We're just going to go very, very quickly toward what we see as the fundamentals that are causing some of the weakness in the single stream recycling market, particularly from the standpoint of the Chinese. And there are three big ones. One is the problem of glass. When you mix glass and paper, the glass breaks and the broken glass gets into the paper. And Tim described some of those problems. It messes up the machinery. It's a major issue. The second is food and paper. Food shouldn't be in there, but food gets in there. And when the food gets in there, it contaminates the paper, and that is a primary cause of the contamination problem in single stream. And the third is an interesting phenomenon of human psychology called wish cycling. Apparently, they tell us that when you have single stream, you have one recycling stream. And so people are more likely to put things into the recycling stream that can't be recycled at all, because they think, well, maybe it can be. And so just send it over in the single stream, and the folks down at the MRF are going to figure it out. And we have a photograph here that indicates, looks like it's a light, a desk light, and perhaps there's a tire because rubber's perhaps theoretically recyclable, and a few other doodads in here. So the wish cycling becomes a big problem in that you're getting in your single stream a lot of stuff that just doesn't belong in any stream whatsoever. And the name for it is wish cycling. So those are three of the big reasons why single stream has problems above and beyond the simple mixing of the paper and the paper and the combined that have to be separated again mechanically or have to hire people to do it, is that you get these contamination issues which become intractable. And it's a function much more of single stream than a dual stream. And that's just the nature of people. This is a slide very quickly on the progress of the Chinese, which again, that's the ultimate buyer. In 2013, they adopted a policy called Green Fence, where they set certain limits on how much contamination there could be. They started inspecting at the border. The policy in 2017, National Sword was the big one. That's where they announced that they were banning several different categories of materials, including single-stream recycling. That went into effect in, I believe, January 1 of this year, which is, if you remember, that coincided almost exactly when the price just completely plummeted from zero down to whatever negative we're in any particular month. They now have a blue sky policy, which is implementing the National Sword. And they're, as Tim mentioned, they're doing a lot more inspections now. They're coming over here to inspect the bales before they even get on the boat. So the Chinese are extremely aggressive now in trying to make certain that the recyclables that they get, the dual stream, are clean, and the single stream has, again, for economic reasons, when you integrate all the economics together, it's really just fallen off the wagon in terms of the ability to be used again. And it's ultimately, although many people have not seen this yet, it's probably, in many cases, it's going to just start getting thrown out because it's starting to pile up and there's no market for it anymore. And that's what we are beginning to see at the RRA. It's why we're watching these numbers very carefully. The numbers, again, say more to us than just the numbers. It's ultimately going to become a reality on the ground, and in fact it already is. And what we have is, these are the results. And what we're seeing in the press, if I was to post articles from the trade press, we could go on for another 50 slides. I will spare you. There were two articles in particular in the popular press that I just clipped very quickly. One was from the HuffPost in January, explaining what was about to happen, and in fact was starting to happen. Here's a couple of quotes from it. And again, we can make these available to you. Basically describing that this has created a shockwave through what was otherwise the nature of recycling up through the end of 2017. And there was an article just this month in the Wall Street, first the HuffPost, that described all the places where the garbage was piling up. Just these paragraphs I clipped alone are Oregon, Ireland, Calgary, Canada, and Halifax. And different anecdotes about piling up. And Australia is one of the worst ones, is piling up there. It's really worldwide. Article this month in the Wall Street Journal, recycling is under siege. And a couple of quotes. This gets to the nature of single stream, and it says, single stream collections took hold in the waste hauling industry about 20 years ago and continue to be widely used. We're our own worst enemies. So this is not something the Ulster County RRA invented. This is something which is coming to us. This is not something we really have the ability to affect. And again, the thing that we consider very carefully is our own role in this as the RRA. We have a dual stream facility. We do not have flow control, which means that we simply, the single stream ends up on our floor. We have to find markets for it. The haulers, most of the haulers, find their own markets for it. Anybody who believes that this is a good practice can find their own markets for it. They're in exactly the same situation we are. We do not process it. Our MRF doesn't process it. So we're looking at our role in this and looking at our need to essentially break even in our role in it. And so from that point forward, this is what we've been seeing for the last really year and a half. We've followed this very closely. This is not new. We've known this has been covered in the press for a while, and it's now coming home to roost in a very big way, much faster than we expected. Through 2017, we kind of told Tim, keep tabs on it, let us know. We were kind of hovering around zero, and now we're just seeing this thing just literally month to month. It's just going south. And the other thing that we didn't put on site, I'll get to in a moment. I just want to get this out there. Mechanically, we've had a series of recycling outlets that we've used. Again, Tim and Charlie, each month to month, they check the markets, where can we sell our recycling. We've had 5 or 6 or 7 throughout Ulster County and elsewhere. What we've seen over the last year or so is that for single stream, those markets have just dried up, and we're left with one outlet now, down in Beacon. There's one left, and Tim informs me, and he can speak in more detail on this, that we're getting squeezed on that one as well. Before they made a certain number of truckloads available to us in terms of what they would accept, that's getting less and less and less. So we're really, on a day-to-day basis and on a physical basis, we're seeing this market dry up. And so it's not just a numbers game. It's very, very foreseeable that at some point in the future, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, that this is just, we're seeing it anecdotally, we're seeing the reasons why fundamentally, we're seeing the numbers. We're looking at a market that is going to dry up at some point, at least on face value, that's what we're seeing. And so the question is, how do we approach that from our role handling the county's waste, from what we do, which is to handle your MSW and work and handle dual stream recycling, and at present be a floor for single stream that just transfers it from people that bring it to us to the markets that are available. The lady had a question.
Thank you. So you had said that the single stream, if I can get this right, for the RRA that they handle is about 40% from a couple of municipalities, including Kingston,
Kingston also.
and the rest by the haulers. Now, in this last 5 to 6 month period, when you've seen this dramatic change in where the single stream is going, has that had an influence on the percentage of the private haulers that you have, or is that already contractual? Does that make sense?
Makes sense. I'm not sure I know the answer. Tim knows the answer.
Has that gone up?
Can you stop taking it from
Has the
them?
percentage changed though?
Has the percentage changed? Yeah, I can answer that. We're at capacity. We can't take any more single stream than we're already taking. And I still get phone calls from big haulers. They have their own recycling plants, but they don't want to take it.
So they want to bring it.
They want to dump it on us as much as possible. I'm maxed out. When Dave says that we're dealing with this on a daily basis, I get phone calls at night, at 8 o'clock at night from Charlie Wicker, let me know if we got even move it tomorrow morning. You know, that's how we're dealing with this every single day.
Can you stop taking it from them?
From the
haulers?
That's what we're talking about tonight. That's what we're talking about tonight, whether or not we're going to stop taking single stream across the board. You remember we're an authority, so like the Thruway Authority, they don't discriminate on who drives up the Thruway. You know what I mean? So they take tractor trailers and so forth. But so we're talking about not taking single stream at all. Because remember, we don't process that. When I was at this seminar, people were amazed that we take single stream. And they would say, "Aren't you a dual stream plant?" And I said, "What do you do with a single stream? I've never heard that before." It was a new concept to everybody. You have a dual stream plant. How can you possibly take single stream? I said, "Well, we dump it on the floor. We take it from the small truck and we put it on a big truck. That's all we do." And everybody was curious about that. Why you even do that? Because places like Rockland County or Westchester County, they're completely dual stream. Right? Those counties chose to stay dual stream, just like we did. Madison County is another one. So those counties decided years ago to stay dual stream, and that's the pathway that we're looking at. And even those directors in my positions were wondering why we're even taking single stream, because we talked about it at the conference a little bit.
We did make copies of the article from the New York Times, and I don't know where they are right now, but we had multiple copies to hand out this afternoon. Before we continue on with questions, I just want to introduce the members of the board so you know who you're who you're talking to, or looking at and so forth. To my right here is Jack Hayes. To Jack's right is Brian Devine. To my center here is Dave Gordon, who's the vice president of the board. Next to me, to my left, is our legal counsel, Ken Gilligan, and next to Ken is Charlie Landy, who's our treasurer for the RRA. And our executive director is over here to our far right, Tim Rose. Now, what we'd like to do now is answer questions. And
I have a question, and that is, what are the options for the city of Kingston and the haulers that are currently collecting single stream if the agency, I mean, I understood the agency might be passing on the cost, but I didn't understand that you might not be taking it, so I just want to know what the options are.
I'm going to let Tim, and if Mayor Noble's interested, I'm going to let them both answer the question. I would just point out one thought, that is that one of the reasons why we're considering not taking is, again, because we're seeing a collapsing market. And if it does indeed completely collapse, it doesn't matter what happens. The only question is where it's going to pile up. And I don't want to be apocalyptic or exaggerate, but that's one of the eventualities that we're looking at, and you know, we look what the options are. So that's one of the main drivers for why we're considering doing that. And so ultimately, if the market completely dries up, you know, the decision's almost being made for us. Whether the only question is whether it's in the RRA or whether it's in the city. But I'll certainly let Tim answer that technically, and if Mayor Noble wants to answer it as well, and talk about what the options are.
First of all, and I'm not just saying this because the mayor's in the room, but the city has done a phenomenal job of trying to take the contamination out. They really have. We talked to the city. We had some phone calls 6 months ago or so about some few issues that we had, and right away we saw an immediate impact. The mayor could probably talk about that a little as well. I do know, after speaking with the mayor, that I know it's through some enforcement, through education and so forth, but we saw an immediate turnaround. So the city's doing its part, and I want to be clear on that. They're doing a very good job. However, when it leaves our facility, when it comes to us and you get put on the long haul truck, it's mixed with a lot of other single stream recycling. But more importantly, when it goes to the single stream plant, it's mixed with single stream recycling from all over the Hudson Valley. So the benefit to that is that on the city's efforts is they keep taking it. Because if the loads are too contaminated, like I said, they will charge $107 a ton. If it's too contaminated, they won't even let you tip it. So in other words, they'll say, go back. Find someplace else to do it, go away. And that's a real possibility if the loads are too contaminated. So the city is doing their part. They are limiting us now to 2 to 3 trucks a day, which is about where we are. They're allowing us to bring 3 trucks a day for 4 days a week. On Wednesdays, it's only 2 trucks a day. We had to beg with them and plead with them today because we had 3 truckloads worth of material and I had no place to store it. I have a small little area of the MRF, because again, the MRF is a dual stream, so I've got the rest of the MRF is set up to deal with dual stream processing. I have a small area of the MRF that I don't have any storage. I could probably store at the most 1 day, and that's it. And if I don't get that offloaded by the end of the day, I got to be ready. I have to be ready for the next morning. So if they can't take that additional truck, it does put us back a little bit, and I might have to load additional trailers and park them someplace inside the MRF, to try our own trailers. Not even the company that's hauling it for us. So, so this is becoming a day-to-day issue routinely. So, did I answer your question?
Well, the question was what the options.
Oh, the options. I'm sorry. The options. I apologize. I got off on a tangent there. The options for the city of Kingston. There could be a couple. I know they have the one trucks that they use for the single stream. One option is you could collect one type of material one day and another type another day. So you can collect cardboard one day, you can collect paper one day, or put those 2 together. That's okay too, because it's still fiber related. And you can tip it at our facility. That's something that we can process. And that's a 0 tipping fee, by the way, because we can market those. So that's still at a 0 tipping fee. So anybody that brings us dual stream is 0. Okay, that's one option. Another option for the city would be to, they could load it themselves. I know they have their own transfer station, which would take a little bit of modification too, but they can do the exact same thing we're doing. The only thing we're doing when we receive it, again, the little trucks come in, I say little trucks, the big recycling trucks, come in, they tip it on our floor, it's dumped on our floor. We use an excavator with a grapple to load it on a truck. That's essentially what happens, because we can't process it, and that gets sent off to a single stream facility. So the city could maybe retrofit their transfer station or use I don't know about the city's infrastructure, but if they have a large warehouse someplace that they could bring into somewhere that's enclosed, they could essentially do the same thing. Those are probably your 2 best options. But I know you said you wanted that, Mayor. Did you want to comment at all?